Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is a channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on, and talk about some books. If you've been around for even like the last week on my channel, you know that this month is the month for readathons for me. I am so excited because we've got Magical Readathon and Realmathon both happening this month. If you don't already know, or if you haven't been tuning into my recent videos, we've got Realmathon, which is a month-long readathon hosted throughout April. It's hosted by Cassidy over at Covers with Cass, and it's a competitive readathon where you sign up to be part of one of 4 teams and you read in order to defeat the other realms. Realmathon was actually the first ever readathon that I took part in back when I first got into my YouTube channel. So of course I had to join the sort of second iteration of this readathon this April, and I'm super excited to be taking part in that one. But as for the second readathon, we've got Magical Readathon, which is a long-standing readathon hosted by G over at Book Roast. Again, it's hosted throughout the month of April. This April we are doing the spring equinox. It's the second spring equinox, and the purpose of it is essentially to read books that relate to courses that you have to complete in order to get further in your career path. If you've been around on my channel for a little bit, you know that I've been doing a Magical Readathon catch-up for like a year and a bit now in order to be able to finally take part in real time and feel like I did all the legwork to get to this point. So this month is the first time that I finally get to take part in real time with this readathon, and I am beyond over the moon about it. Let's get started with the first book. I'm going to be vlogging this whole experience, this whole month, with weekly vlogs every single week. Let's find out what I'm reading first. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to be kickstarting into straight away is going to be Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This book I think came out in 2022 to massive hype, and then there were very mixed reviews I think afterwards. I'm keen to see what I think because I've had kind of mixed thoughts on V.E. Schwab. Invisible Life of Addie LaRue for one was absolutely like god tier for me. It was incredible, but then like Darker Shade of Magic didn't really love. So I'm intrigued by this one, especially because it's mixed media as well, and apparently it's a very quick read and has some incredibly beautiful illustrations throughout. As for what it's about, it says 16-year-old Olivia Pryor is missing 3 things: a mother, a father, and a voice. Her mother vanished all at once, her father by degrees, and her voice was a thing she never had to start with. Her only companions are the ghouls she sees and her mother's journal, which captured a mind in turmoil. And I'm gonna stop there because that's kind of an intriguing start to it, and I'm intrigued to see what I think of it. As for the length of this, I think this book is only like 300 and something pages long, so should be a pretty quick read. I'll update you when I'm about halfway through it maybe, and yeah, let's get started with the first book of the readathon. How is everybody doing? How's the first day of Magical Readathon and Realmathon gone for everybody? Have you read a book? Have you finished a book? What you been doing? I started and finished Gallant by V.E. Schwab, which was an interesting read, I won't lie. The first thing I want to say about it is that like the artwork in between each of the chapters is absolutely gorgeous, and I am just amazed by like the creepy eerie feeling it gave, and also the fact that it looks kind of like those Rorschach drawings. As for the rest of the book, I gave it 3.5 stars, which is by no means bad. I wasn't really sure how I felt about the main characters, particularly Olivia, throughout the entirety of this book. I mean, the secondary characters, because the very nature of this story is that it's told from the perspective of a girl who's mute, which means there's no dialogue, or like limited dialogue in the story. There's other ways that the characters communicate, which means that it's very hard to like get to know the secondary characters and feel like they're well built or anything like that, because there's no sort of conversation, there's no like relationship building really happening in the traditional sense between them. It was definitely all about Olivia. But as for Olivia, I didn't really know if I got along with her, because every time I started to like sympathize with her, she'd have like a violent thought or a violent impulse, and she would just seem very destructive, and I didn't love that, and it felt very immature, very young, that like every time she wanted to grab someone's attention, she'd like throw something off a table and make it shatter on the ground, and everybody would just kind of brush it off and be like, oh, that's fine. The story definitely characterized her, I guess, as very impulsive and somewhat violent. And then I think my other issue was that, I don't know if this is like a standalone fantasy under 300 pages issue or if it's a this book issue, but I feel like whenever a book is this short and it's dealing with the fantasy and the world building and all the magic and everything like that, there's never enough time spent building the characters and building the relationships. So, you know, Olivia goes to live with these people and she's there for all of a couple of days before she risks her life in order to save them and the family, which I get. She's a young woman, she's impulsive. That would kind of make more sense for her character. But then like grown-ups and that, risking their lives to help her and making really strong connections with her within a couple of days. And I struggled to buy into it. But I think the atmosphere was just so palpable. The tension was so palpable. You definitely, through like the Rorschach drawings and the diary entries especially, were just these tension moments where the minute one would get read and the minute it would get crossed out, or the chaos of the way it was written would really just make you feel the tension and the chaos and the disorder of this whole situation. And then like Olivia would describe this estate as luxurious and vibrant and beautiful with colors that she'd never seen before in comparison to everything she experienced at the orphanage. But then whenever it would turn nighttime or she would have a conversation with Matthew, all of a sudden things would be described as eerie and creepy, and there were shadows and it was dark and there was more tension in the writing, and I really liked watching that transition happen between the different conversations. Like I said, I really loved the journal entries from Olivia's mother. I think they provided a really, really intense moment of like tension and disorder and chaos. It gave definitely the vibes I think this book was trying to convey. And the other thing I did like about it is how communication was explored, specifically because Olivia is mute. So it was explored through, you know, nonverbal cues and sign language and music and artwork and different ways for this character to communicate with other people. And I really did like that, though I think it was kind of cheapened, I guess, towards the end when all of a sudden Death and all the shadows and everything could hear her thoughts. So it was basically like reading verbal communication again. I would have liked it, I guess, if that was handled in a different way. The very last thing I want to mention though, and again, I don't know if this is a problem with this book or if this is a problem with like me reading YA and middle grade like fantasy, because this definitely toes the line between YA and middle grade, is I don't get how like 15-year-old children are solving the world's problems when there are fully capable adults who over decades and decades of history have been trying to do it and can't do it, but then Olivia gets there and within like a couple days she's able to sort it all out. And I think maybe that's the nature of like YAs and middle grades, and that is it does tend to be this younger person solving everything, and the adults are either incompetent or they're unable or something like that. So yeah, I get that it's like a thing, but I really struggle to buy into it. But anyway, I gave this book 3.5 stars. So this was the first read of Magical Readathon and Realmathon. For Magical Readathon, this gets me the Art of Illusion class done, which is great. So that's that done. And as for Realmathon, let's calculate the points for that one together. All the books that I'm going to be reading are going to be on the positive side of things because I just want to get points for my team. So let's pull up the Twitter thread that has all the calculations of points and things. Okay, so this one is not a romance, so it doesn't get points for being my team genre, but it is a hybrid. I think it's a sort of fantasy horror, so I'll get 10 points I think for that. It'll get points for send a message to an ally because I can spell my name on the cover, so B-E-T-H. It'll get points for hide your riffs, and that's for author uses their initials, so obviously V.E. Schwab uses her initials. It'll get points for regroup and rejuvenate, a book with mental health rep, because there are definitely discussions around mental health. It'll get points for cross to enemy territory because it's a YA or middle grade, and it kind of toes the line between both, so I think that's what 4 prompt. And then it'll get points for Distract the Other Realm, which is a book with multi-POVs, because there are like little chapters in here that are told from like Death's perspective. So that is this book. I'll put the total number of points I gathered for it here so that you know. But yeah, this is the first read that I got through. Then late last night, Magical Readathon, G over at Book Gross put up a sort of Twitter thread, which was super exciting because it's the first like quest of the readathon. I'll put the graphic up here, but let's read it together. It says, first alchemy class of the semester done. Phew. As you wipe the dragon scale powder off your robes and pick up your advanced alchemy workbook, you find a slip of paper underneath that you swear was not there before. With a gilded edge, it looks too formal to be a random piece of paper from another student's notebook. You look around, but most people have already left and there's nobody around. You lift it towards the light to have a better look at it, and the words start scorching into the paper. Your name appears appears at the top, written in unnervingly neat handwriting. As the embers do not stop and the words start bleeding into one another as the paper burns, you read the rest urgently. I could use your assistance. If you are free, please come to my classroom after midnight. I've been informed by a reliable source that someone is going to try to remove me from my post. I need to stop this ploy, but I cannot do it alone, and it's from Aubryn Bluewing, which I think is the alchemy professor. Choices: do not accept it, go to the refuse folder, or accept it and read a book with the word night in the title or nighttime in the cover. And then once you've finished it, you go to the accept folder and you find out what happens next. Naturally, I immediately went looking through my shelves because I just finished one book for a book that has nighttime on the cover or has the word night in the title. And I picked up With This Kiss by Carrie Hope Fletcher, and I got about 48 pages into it last night, and I am going to be DNFing because I can't read this book. I'm just going to read you the spiral that was my notes app as I got through these 40 pages. So my first note a couple pages in was, there are a lot of pop culture and movie references on top of being absolutely force-fed the idea that the main character loves books and movies. I hate it when an author doesn't trust their reader to read between the lines and thinks they have to literally spell everything out. It makes the book feel so forced. Then I get to my second point, and that's like 20 or 30 pages in. Bloody hell, this is too woke. I like the opportunity for education being included in the book, as well as the inclusive language and reading materials for the book club, but the straight up mini monologue, it was really out of place and very preachy. It just didn't flow, so it felt very staged and tokenistic, like the author was trying too hard to be inclusive and appeal to a woke audience. And then third point, at around the 47 page mark, okay, one occurrence, and Lorelai just knows that every time she will ever kiss people, she'll see how they die, and she was 13 when she figured this out. I'm 36 pages in and praying this happens to her again later in life, so that this whole story isn't based off of one experience she had one time when she was 13. I can't buy into that. So I'm removing the highlighter that I'm using as a bookmark, DNFing this book, and now I need to find another book that has night in the title or nighttime on the cover or something. So I will find that book and I will be back in a sec and we will talk about it. Okay, I'm back. So the book that we are going to be replacing With This Kiss with is going to be God Killer by Hannah Kaner. And I know it doesn't like look like night and it doesn't have a night on the cover, but this is a big old moon and the moon comes out at nighttime. So by my logic, this is a nighttime cover. So as for what this book is about, let's read the inside blurb because I know nothing. And it says, "You are not welcome here, God Killer. Kissen's family were killed by zealots of a fire god. Now she makes a living killing gods and enjoys it. That is until she finds a god she cannot kill. Skedi, a god of white lies, has somehow bound himself to a young noble, and they are both on the run from unknown assassins. Joined by a disillusioned knight on a secret quest, they must travel to the ruined city of Blenraden, where the last of the wild gods reside, to each beg a favor. Pursued by demons and in the midst of a burgeoning civil war, they will all face a reckoning. Something is rotting at the heart of the kingdom, and only they can be the ones to stop it." So yeah, that sounds really interesting to me, and it's only like 200 and something pages, which is even better. So I should be able to smash through this one pretty quickly and hopefully get it done in the day so that I can update you later today and so that I can find out what the rest of this like quest is ASAP, because I'm really intrigued. That is what I'm going to be reading today. Hopefully I like this one a lot better than With This Kiss. I'm going to go DNF that one now, maybe take it to the local charity shop while I'm out today, because the plan for today is Ben and I are going to go to the shops, do a little bit of grocery shopping. I think there was a watch that Ben wanted to buy, so he might go and get that. But yeah, it's going to be a pretty chill day, I think, easy breezy. So I'm going to get started on this book while he's still fast asleep, because it's like 9:30 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday, and for some reason I woke up and was like, let's do things, and he's like, I'm gonna sleep now. So yeah, I'm gonna get to reading and I'll check in with you in a bit. It is now, God, what time is it actually? It's 8:46 p.m. on Sunday, the 2nd of April. So we are on the second day of Magical Readathon and Realmathon, and I have just finished my second, but technically third, because I did read The Legacy by Elle Kennedy. I did finish that book in this month, but I don't really count it for either of these because I started it in March. But anyway, that's a long spiel to say I finished God Killer by Hannah Kaner. I think I was saying Hannah Kent for a while, but It's Hannah Kana, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 stars. I'm actually in love with this book and cannot wait to see what happens with the rest of this series. Like, I found out today that it's part of a series. It's the first book, so I'm excited for the rest of it. But quickly before we go into the review, I think I mentioned in my previous clip that as part of the sort of side quest happening in Magical Readathon, there is like an alchemy side quest that you can take part in, and this book was for the first prompt of that. So that's nighttime on the cover. Because there's a moon, I call that nighttime. But then also being part of Realmathon, let's calculate up the points that I'm gonna get. So I've got the little score sheet in front of me. It's a hybrid genre, so it's like fantasy romance, bit of fantasy adventure, that sort of thing. And it's the genre of my realm as well, being a fantasy romance. So that's 20 points so far. Then I get another 10 points for it being between 201 and 400 pages. And then as for the actual sort of prompts it relates to, we've got Source of Light on the cover, which is 6 points, and that's the moon. It's from an author that's new to me, so that's another 5 points. It's got mental health rep, which is another 4 points, and it's a YA, I believe, so that's another 3 points. Oh, and it's multi-POV as well, so that's another 2 points. So the total number of points I'll put up on the screen here, and all the lists, so you can see what this one's going to get me. But now let's talk about my review. So firstly, for characters, because we are going to be using Corpile, because that's how I do all my reviews. So I really loved how well-rounded these characters felt. I know that, like, when I was talking about Gallant, I was talking about the fact that in sort of shorter, either standalone or sort of beginning of the series fantasy novels, I find sometimes that the character development is sacrificed because they're trying to build the world and they're trying to do all these other things, and so the character development comes later. But that definitely was not the case in this story. These characters felt so well built. You got this moment at the very beginning, this first chapter of the book, that set the stakes perfectly for our main character, Kissen, making it clear why she chose the life of the god killer, but then the way that she changed and grew and progressed throughout the story as she met lots of different characters, met different gods, saw different characters go through their various struggles and talk about their different experiences, and the way she really absorbed all of that and it made her grow into this really well-rounded character, I think was explored perfectly. I think the sort of found family created between her and Inara was super sweet, and Inara had her own beautiful character arc as well, of going from this sort of very unsure of herself young girl who's completely lost in this world to really being so set on fighting for herself and fighting for being involved in everything rather than being told to just wait on the sidelines because she couldn't contribute anything. You know, she really found her own and found a new little power, I guess. And then of course I love the romance that was sort of built between Kissen and Elo, how he kind of had this history of very much like survivor's guilt from experiencing a battle where his king's life was really put at risk, and it's a king he really had a relationship, and how the king was able to use that to make Elo go on this particular quest, I think was really interesting. So the manipulation, I guess, of guilt was an interesting piece to uncover in that character, and then how he kind of came out the other side of it and found this new family, I guess, in Kissen and in Inara. But I think my favorite character in terms of growth was really Skadir, which I'm 100% saying wrong, which is like this sort of little god-like being, and he's attached to Inara, and he's definitely positioned at the very beginning of the book as a friend, as someone you can trust, as someone who really cares about Inara. And it definitely raised the question in my mind of how come this one god is so different to all the others, and I was really worried that that would just kind of be completely brushed over, like what makes this one different, but it really wasn't. I loved that there were a couple of chapters in this book where they really delved into the fickle nature of the gods and the selfish nature of the gods and all of that in order to make that particular god feel a bit more well-rounded and give him a reason for why he's different. And that reason being, you know, he wants to maintain these connections that he really values, and succumbing to like his base or instincts, I guess, or his impulses isn't going to make that happen. So I liked how that character grew especially. As for atmosphere, the journey sort of style of a novel isn't something I usually enjoy, because in my mind it's very A to B to C to D, you know, just step by step go through the journey. But I think the way it was done in this book really built the tension and really built the stakes to make the atmosphere really immersive, because you have this sort of almost timed threat throughout the book where, you know, every couple of days they know there's going to be another demon attack and they're trying to figure out why. So you have this constant feeling of anxiety, I guess, because you know that another attack's coming but you don't know how to stop it, and that definitely, I think, lent itself to the atmosphere during this book. As for the writing, I really enjoyed it. It's definitely the sort of novel where you blink and you miss something, so you really do have to pay attention, but I like that the world and the magic and everything was built really clearly. The villain was constructed really clearly with really clear motives. All of the characters, their stakes and their tension were constructed very clearly, and there was a real emphasis on having those familial moments and those sweet moments and those calm moments between all the different characters that really build out the relationships and make you have that sort of well-rounded character kind of feeling. And I like that that was really emphasized in the writing of this story, even if it meant that there were some slower moments throughout the story. As for the plot, like I said, the mini battles really kept the tension high. It really kept the pace of the book moving quite quickly. And then I really loved that it was told through multiple different perspectives, because it meant that whenever something happened, like a betrayal, you were always seeing it from the perspective of the person that would feel most affected by that betrayal. As for intrigue, as you can probably tell, my intrigue was very high. Loved this read. As for logic, again, I think the world was built really logically. I think the magic was really clearly explained. I think I bought into everything because the relationships were built really well in a way that made sense, so that when characters would risk their lives for each other, I wouldn't be questioning like, I'm sorry, why the hell? As for enjoyment, I really loved this book. Had an amazing time reading it. So 4.5 stars, and I'm so glad that I did not put this off. But now what do we do next? Just earlier today, the sort of second stage of the alchemy side quest was announced, and it's gone up on the Google Drive. So let's run through what the second stage of that is going to be. Since I read Godkiller, it means I have accepted this quest rather than refused it. So we're going to go through to the alchemy classroom and we're going to find out what the next step of this journey is. So I'm going to open up the graphic on my screen and read from it, but I will paste it here so that you guys can see it too. The academy corridors are so eerily silent at night. You try to be as quiet as you can, but your light footsteps echo still. You summon a small flame, cupping it between your hands to see a bit better. You almost stumble over a fallen armor set because your hood makes it hard to see. At last you reach the alchemy tower and find the door to the alchemy theater. You can still hear the enchanted cauldrons bubble, but the room lacks the usual fire crackling and frantic scribbling noises that you're so accustomed to. Ah, you're here. You got my note. Good. As you sit down, the professor explains that he comes from a very competitive line of mages who did not take it well when he quit their alchemy family business due to its somewhat unsavory nature. Occasionally, one of them tries to sabotage his career at Aurelium Academy in an attempt to force him to return. It seems like his brother has sent a letter to the elders that would accomplish just that. However, the contents are unknown. Auburn knows the courier will be staying at the Wild Moon Inn, but it is likely they would recognize him if he went himself, and the art of illusion has never been his strong suit. Would you be willing to go and intercept this letter for us? I'm sure another will be sent, but we can read and know the nature of this Valerie to make sure no evidence can actually be tied to me. He looks exhausted but speaks casually. You get a feeling this happens far too often. I have no intention of ever joining them, but they seem to be under the false belief that if I am left with no other choice, I would. I hate to ask you this, but I need someone I can trust. It cannot hurt to investigate. So the options are to finish talking to the professor. The prompt is to read the majority of my next book with the Alchemy Theatre ambiance room in the background. And this can't be, I had it confirmed on the live earlier today, this can't be a book that's on my actual TBR for Magical Readathon. It has to be a different book. So I have to find a different book that I can read with this ambiance room in the background. And then when I've completed this, I get 10 guild reputation points and I head to the Wild Moon Inn. So I have to go find a book that I'm going to read for this next step of the readathon. Okay, I'm back. I think I might have moved slightly, but anyway, that doesn't matter. The book that I've picked, which I have selected just now, is really good actually, by Monica Hasey. This is a very recent release, I think. It's like 2023, I'm pretty sure. Like this year it came out, beginning of this year. And it's supposed to be really heartwarming and fun and a quick and easy read. So I'm gonna give this a go. And you know what? That cover just kind of appeals to me right now, just because it's really bold and orange and I don't really read that sort of stuff. What it's about actually is Maggie's marriage has ended just 608 days after it started, but she's fine. She's doing really good actually. Sure, she's alone for the first time in her life, can't afford her rent, and her obscure PhD is going nowhere. But at the age of 29, Maggie is determined to embrace her new status as a surprisingly young divorcee. Soon she's taking up sadness hobbies, getting back out there sex-wise, and oversharing in the group chat. As Maggie throws herself headlong into the chaos of her first year of divorce, she finds herself questioning everything, including Why do we still get married? Did I fail before I even got started? And how many 4 a.m. delivery burgers do I need to eat until I am happy? Laugh out loud, funny, razor sharp, and painfully relatable, really good actually, is an irresistible debut novel about the uncertainties of modern love, friendship, and happiness from a stunning new voice in fiction, Monica Pacey. So yeah, I'm kind of keen to give this a go because I've had a few people like mention that they bought it, but then I haven't actually seen any reviews of people who have read it. So yeah, maybe I'll be the first one. I don't know. So I'm going to start reading this tonight, but because the prompt is that I have to read most of this with that ASMR room, I think that G is going to create, I do have to sort of wait until tomorrow, I think, when it's being released before I can actually read the majority of this book. So I'm going to give it a start tonight, but it'll be a predominantly after tomorrow read. And then I should probably actually get back to the rest of my TBR for this month. But yeah, this is the next book, so let's get started. It is Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. It's Tuesday now, and I know I didn't update you guys yesterday, but honestly I was at work in the office the whole day, and then I got home and my makeup was looking horrible and I was really tired, and all I wanted to do was sit down and read, and so that is what I did, and I got a decent chunk of the way through really good actually. So I am 230 pages in and I'm really enjoying this. I didn't expect to because I was kind of looking through the blurb and it just sounded like a sort of very character-driven story and very much like, not day in the life because there's multiple days, but like, you know, what are they called when it's just like you just follow a character going through their daily life rather than any sort of like plot-based thing where there's a clear like beginning, middle, end sort of thing. I can't remember what that's called, but that's what this felt like, and that can sometimes be a challenging sort of writing style and storytelling style for me, because when it's done for like Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, obsessed with it, but then there are other books where I just get really bored. This one is definitely going down the sort of Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine train, and I am loving this, and I think part of that is because of how it's written, and it's written in this way where you genuinely feel like you are inside this character's head, because she does not hold back. There is no filter. She is, everything that is communicated on the page is exactly what you could imagine a regular human being to be thinking in all of these experiences that she's going through. She's not afraid to say really dumb things. She's not afraid to say really horrible things, but she's also not afraid to say really funny things and like self-deprecating things. And you know, it feels like you're inside her head, and it's written in this not conversational, but very like train of thought kind of way. Like I'll read you a sample of the very beginning of this book. My marriage ended because I was cruel, or because I ate in bed, or because he liked electronic music and difficult films about men and nature, or because I did not, or because I was anxious and this made me controlling, or because red wine makes me critical, or because hunger, stress, and white wine makes me critical too, or because I was clingy at parties, or because he smoked weed every day and I did not think it was actually the same thing as my drinking 2 cups of coffee in the morning, or because we fell in love too young, and how could our actual lives compare to the idea we'd had of what our lives could be when we were barely 20 and our bodies were almost impossibly firm. So yeah, that's sort of like train of thought. She like lists things in this way throughout like multiple sections of the novel when she's trying to figure out all the different reasons for something happening, or when she's like going, I guess, into a bit of a spiral because something embarrassing is happening, and it really does feel like you're inside her head, and I really love that. And then there are these chapter breaks which are absolutely golden. I'll have to find a good one for you, but like they are just like moments in time, I guess, in her life. So there's one called The Fantasy, where she talks about a fantasy that she's had. There's one where it's like select advice I received at a party listed in order of relevance to me, and she just like lists all the advice that she received at a random party that she went to. But there's one that I really love. Reasons I cried, 12 to 13 November. Bus too full and too hot. Neck looked busted. Dogs, generally. Took a taxi home from a date's house late at night, and the window was open, and the city looked empty and beautiful, but I knew it was full of people, and I felt connected to them all. And also, I was incredibly drunk. Tried 5 times to remember my password for the app store, couldn't do it, tried to reset it, couldn't do that either, and eventually remembered it was my own name with an exclamation mark. Giro saw me open a granola bar at work and witheringly asked if I was treating myself, and I was. Thought about how much effort my parents put into teaching me how to read. Had sex with Simon, and it was lovely and caring, and the tears surprised us both. One of my students called me tall in a charged way. Had sex with Simon and cried again, and then he asked about it and I cried more. Watched a documentary about how many kinds of animals are extinct now. Someone stood me up during the wrong bit of my cycle. Those chapter breaks are really, really funny, and they're really immersive, and they really give you an insight into the character's mind in the specific moment at that point in the divorce that she's going through. This whole story is told chronologically as she goes through each stage of sort of moving on from this divorce and the experiences that she had with her husband, and then all of those little chapter breaks really are good points to sort of let you know how long it's been since the divorce happened, and also to just give you a really cool insight into her frame of mind at that specific moment. Anyway, it is 7:30 in the morning on Tuesday, which means I have about an hour or so of reading that I can get done before work starts today, and then I am head down, bum up, getting into work. So I am going to keep reading this and hopefully make a decent dent in the last third of this book. Maybe I'll get half of it read, and then yeah, I'll update you at the end of the day, hopefully by the time I have finished this. So I'll see you in a bit. You and I are gonna make an agreement. The messy as hell background and desk and everything that you see behind you doesn't exist. It's not here. It's perfectly clean, white, beautiful, gorgeous, interior decorated, everything. This, not a thing. Cool, now that we've got that sorted, let's talk about what my day has been like, which is to say that I finished a book today, and that book, as you probably guessed, was really good actually, by Monica Hasey, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I am having a fabulous reading week this week. It is going so good. I am so happy with this book and how it went and how my experience was with it. It was a good read. Before we get into the review, let's talk Realmathon points. So let's get the Realmathon score thing that I've got going up on my phone. So really good actually. Didn't meet hybrid genre and didn't meet genre of my realm, so I didn't get any bonus points for that, but it is between 201 and 400 pages, so I get 10 points for that. I can technically spell my name on the cover. There is a B in here, an E in here, there's a T in the title, and then there's an H over here, so technically that counts. I put it down as having a title with an emotion because like when someone asks you how they are, this is like a fairly standard response for your emotional state, so it's got points for that. It's from a new to me author, Monica Hasey, never read from her before. It's definitely got mental health rep, and I personally think this is underrated because despite the massive hype that I saw on like a couple posts on Twitter and Instagram when this first came out, I haven't seen anything since. I haven't seen anything from people who've actually read the book, nothing. So I'm gonna call that pretty underrated because I think it's amazing, but I haven't seen anybody else saying the same thing just yet. Now let's get into my review. So first up, characters. Maggie, the main character, was definitely a very difficult character to love, which is what made me love reading from her perspective so much. It's what made her character arc so much more satisfying and fulfilling as a reader. From the moment the divorce happened, she definitely leads you to believe that she's recounting everything that's happening to her, no filter, just no holds barred, like she is going full hell to the leather. She doesn't care. She's telling you everything, embarrassing or otherwise. But it's only later on in the book when you realize that, you know, she's starting to have a bit of a breakdown, everything's falling apart, that she's still in her own mind filtered her own experience. She's blocked out so many of the embarrassing things she's done. She's blocked out so many things that she's done that she doesn't want to deal with because, yeah, she's embarrassed by them, or they're particularly unreasonable or borderline loco. And I think in her own mind as well, she's just not willing to face her actions or her decisions until she makes the logical decision to go to therapy and actually face these things head on. As Monica Hasey took me through the full year after the divorce that Maggie experienced at the very beginning of this book, so it does take you through the full year afterwards, I found myself simultaneously sympathizing with her, wanting to hug her, wanting to slap her across the face. All of this is Maggie, by the way, the main character, not the author. Laughing at her, getting mad with her, honestly being absolutely baffled by some of the decisions that she was making or planning to make. She was so interesting to follow because she was such a well-educated character, but so out of touch with her own emotions and with decisions that would be smart decisions and with just the emotions of the people around her. I really love the characterization of her friends as well and how they weren't that sort of happy-go-lucky, you know, chick-lit, you know, everything's fine, we're gonna support you through everything friendship group that you always see in rom-coms. They were like, no, you're being a bitch, we've had enough. And it just made them really, really relatable as Maggie was becoming even more intolerable throughout the book, but still an amazing character to follow. As for atmosphere, I think the moments that really brought me in and really made this read immersive were the chapter breaks that I told you about, where it does take a beat out of the book to tell you exactly what Maggie's state of mind is at that specific moment in time. Maybe not explicitly tell you through words, but through her Google searches or a fantasy that she's having, it tells you so clearly whether she's in denial or whether she's accepted what she's going through. Whilst I definitely did get secondhand embarrassment and anger and sympathy and love and everything throughout the rest of the book, I think those chapter breaks were really the major moments where I was immersed in the story. As for writing, I think the writing of this story is incredible. The way the author was able to make her simultaneously relatable and infuriating, as well as really make you feel like you were inside her head, inside Maggie's head as she was going through all of this, because of the sort of the writing style, the train of thought writing style was just really, really masterful. As for plot, I wrote that there wasn't really much of a plot because it was more of a character arc, but I liked the little sort of side plots, I guess, that was scattered throughout this book, like the romance that was in there at one point, and the sort of fitness journey that she went on, and how when you're going through such a massive change in your life after, you know, 10 or so years with one person and then that ending, your world really does flip upside down and all your priorities change and your interests change and you find yourself experimenting with new things. And so those were definitely trickled in through the side plot, or the multiple side plots in the story, and I did enjoy those because they kept the pace of the story moving, because you always felt the character was moving towards something else, even if it was very like sporadic and chaotic in the way that she would swap between all the different interests. As for logic, I don't think I can genuinely say that any of Maggie's decisions up until the point that she decided to go to therapy were logical, but I think that is the entire point of this book. It felt like it was entirely about how everything can get blown up and thrown out the window when a massive life change like this happens, and how that completely can mess with your head, mess with your relationships, and mess with your own understanding of what is and is not okay to do. So I do appreciate that I don't think this was supposed to be logical, so I didn't mark it down on that front. And as for enjoyment, I really had a good time with this read. It was entertaining and fun and funny, whilst also being infuriating and relatable, and made me sympathetic and angry, and it was just all around a very, very good read. So I gave it 4.5 stars. I would 100% recommend to anyone that finds this sort of genre interesting, that sort of contemporary slice of life style novel, or if you're going through a rough time and you just want to feel better about your own decisions, because this lady does it all and does it all wrong. And it's hilarious. So that is the sort of latest quest prompt done. The next quest prompt doesn't come out until tomorrow. So that means I have time to read a book before the next quest prompt comes out. So I'm going to go back to my original TBR for this month and pick out another book that relates to my course studies, which is going to be Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. And part of the reason is because I have an audiobook of this one and I'm going back into the office tomorrow. So it's a nice fun thing to sort of listen to while I'm on the train, while I'm journeying into work and that sort of thing. So as for what this beautiful, I think fairy loot edition, yep, of the story is about, the blurb says, in every story, there is a hero and a monster. It should have been the perfect summer. Sent to stay with her late mother's eccentric family in London, 16-year-old Joan is determined to enjoy herself. She loves her nerdy job at the historic Holland House, and when her super cute co-worker Nick asks her on a date, it feels like everything is falling into place. Then a Good Samaritan attempt gone wrong sends Joan spinning through time, and her life quickly begins to unravel. Her family aren't just eccentric, they're monsters with terrifying hidden powers, and Nick isn't just a cute boy, he's a legendary monster slayer who will do anything to bring them down. As she battles Nick, Joan is forced to work with the beautiful and ruthless Aaron Oliver, heir to a monster family that hates her own. She'll have to embrace her own monstrousness if she is to save herself and her family, because in this story, she is not the hero. So this book looks like it's going to be YA fantasy romance. It looks like it's going to be a bit of enemies to lovers, bit of love triangle, considering the fact there's 2 main male characters mentioned in the blurb. Looks like there's going to be some time travel in there as well, which I love to see. As for Magical Readathon, this covers my wolf on the cover prompt because I am calling that a wolf and I will not accept any other responses or criticisms of that decision. So that's a wolf. Gonna get started on this book tonight and I will update you on my thoughts when I have a sec, but it's, you know, it's not too long of a book. I think it's like 300 and something, maybe 400 pages. Yeah, 356 pages. So it shouldn't be too long of a read. So yeah, I'm gonna crack on and I will talk to you in a bit. Please excuse the mess that is my bedroom right now. I'm just about to head out. It is Saturday, so I've been super slack on the vlog this week. Apologies for that. I also did my nails at the beginning of the week and they're all like chipped and gross now. Like you can tell which hand I use a lot for like opening things because all the nails on my left hand are chipped. So Anyway, I'm gonna get some nail polish remover and redo those later today. Maybe like a pink color, I don't know. Ben was saying like, oh, I like the blue, do the blue again. I'm like, I'm gonna do the pink. Anyway, Only a Monster. This is what I've been reading at the moment, and I am 177 pages into it. I absolutely smashed out reading in the first couple days of reading this, but now that it is like the, what, 8th of April? For some reason I've just given up on reading this book ever since the 6th. So I need to actually smash out a bunch of this today, but today also just happens to be the day that I have a bunch of plans. So like I'm going shopping with Ben because he wants to get himself a new watch. I'm going to see Beautiful Disaster in the cinemas. I'm doing that one on my own because I don't know anyone that would enjoy watching that movie, because it's kind of one of those ones that's kind of like after where you go and see it because you know it's gonna be kind of bad, but you're going to enjoy it anyway. So I'm going to see that on my own. But as for this book at the moment, I am enjoying reading it. It definitely reads very YA, very young. You can definitely feel like the characters are acting in a way that's very consistent with their age, which I like, because so many YAs you have these children making battle strategy and it makes no sense to me. Whereas this one, like the kids are freaking out. Like there are some of them that are doing really well with the information because they know a lot more about this whole world and this whole situation and the monsters and all the different families and everything. So they're doing pretty okay with everything. But then the main character is like freaking out the entire time because she doesn't know anything about this. I think the one thing this book obviously does, as all YA books do, which I'm getting kind of sick of seeing, is the whole either abandoned family or the whole family has died, or orphans or something like that, and that sort of found family aspect that comes from that. And it makes sense because in YA obviously you're following the younger characters, so you don't want the parental involvement, but I'm like, come on guys, we've got to come up with new and interesting ways that we can make our YA heroes the center of the story without always needing to kill off their parents. But I mean, there's a fun little sort of enemies to lovers situation going on. There's lots of moments in the story where she's like, oh, I caught him looking at me, I caught him doing this, I caught him doing that, but she doesn't really know that that means that he likes her. I think her sister has just told her like, hey hon, I think he likes you. And the reader obviously knows, so it's nice watching that sort of pining going on behind the scenes and her not really being aware of it. And he is the guy that kind of knows everything, so it's nice having those moments where he takes the time with her and he teaches her and he's been really patient with her and he's been really comforting towards her, which is definitely outside of the character that he's always been portrayed to be in his family. Very brutal, very blunt, very, you know, standoffish, all that sort of thing. So it's nice seeing that softer side of that character and seeing there's more to him than meets the eye. But then there is this sort of hunter named Nick that kept coming up in the blurb as like this sort of love triangle situation, but he kind of disappeared after the first like couple chapters of the book. So I kind of want to see him again and how that's going to come into play and how they're going to get out of the time that they're in currently, because they're in the past at the moment. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the book at the moment. It's an enjoyable read, but it's not by any means amazing. As for my plans for today, like you guys know, I am out and about all day today, and when I get home from everything that I'm going to be doing, I need to smash out the rest of this book because the next sort of step in the alchemy quest has just come out, and I'm really keen to see what the next stage is. So I'll be reading that alongside you guys. We'll be making the choices together. I'm super keen for that. But yeah, I gotta go because I gotta go do stuff today, get some coffee and all that sort of thing. So I'm gonna go do that. Maybe take some B-roll while I'm out, and yeah, I will see you later on today. To see a very unpopular movie when it's just come out in cinemas, but then you go to the cinema to see it, and it's only out in very select cinemas as well. But you go to the cinema to see it, and look, there's literally nobody else here. It's just me. The whole cinema to myself. I could sit at the front, I could sit at the back. You know what? Let's sit where we are, where we're assigned, so we don't get in trouble. I'm seeing Beautiful Disaster. Should be fun. I've been told it's very after-esque, so let's go watch the movie. Hey, it is Sunday, which means it is the end of week 1 of my magical readathon, Realmathon, all that fun stuff, weekly reading vlog. And we are finishing the week with the news that I have finished Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. I gave this book 3.5 stars, so not amazing, but not the worst. Before I jump into that, I just want to talk about yesterday, because yesterday was fun / interesting. I went and saw Beautiful Disaster, which is a movie that was adapted from a book by Jamie Maguire, and it was adapted by the same producers and companies and everything that did the After series. So throughout the movie there were lots and lots of references to After, which were hilarious. Absolutely loved that. But the movie as a whole was really bad and really like messy, and random arguments placed throughout the story that didn't make sense, and these characters actively hating each other from the get-go in a way that didn't make a ton of sense. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. It wasn't my favorite movie I've ever seen, but we did end up getting Ben's shopping sorted, so he got his new watch that he wanted, and we had some lunch together, which was nice. So yeah, and I caught the ferry over to the O2 to watch the movie, so that was kind of nice to get on the ferry and, you know, enjoy the sunshine. Anyway, let's get back into the important stuff, which is my thoughts on Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. So the one thing I will say about this book that I really enjoyed is the characters actually felt like their age. So often in YA you have characters that are, you know, less than 18 years old, and they feel like they're so much older because they're coming up with battle strategy and they're dealing with very mature, complex issues with no assistance from the adult figures in their lives, and they're just really all over everything despite acting very immaturely. Whereas this one, the kids had no idea what they were doing. They had no idea how to fix what they were doing. They were able to use their skills in the way that they knew that they could, but I don't think they were doing anything drastic or insane that you wouldn't characterize a 15-year-old doing in that moment. You know, they were acting immaturely and they were doing what they knew that they could. And I really appreciated that. It's really nice to see YA characters actually acting like YA characters. Outside of that, I liked our main character Joan and the various friends that she made through the books. I liked the character of Aaron. I think their sort of enemies to lovers situation was really well developed. I think the soulmates romance that was introduced in this book between Joan and Nick wasn't well developed and wasn't very believable, so I'm hoping that gets delved into in the next book in the series, which I definitely will be reading. But for characters, the plot was so speedy and so fast-paced that I don't think there was a lot of time for character development, and I would have liked a little bit more of it, but I liked the fact that the plot was speedy and it felt like a quick read. As for atmosphere, the settings in both the present and the past timeline were really well explained. They were really sort of atmospheric and that you could really picture everything that they were experiencing. The 90s fashion especially was really well delved into, so I could definitely picture, you know, the butterfly clips and the twisty hair and the low-rise jeans and all that sort of stuff. And I think there was a really good amount of tension written into some of those pivotal scenes, like when they're using their magic in a way that they haven't necessarily used it before, but they know that they can do it because the theory of their magic means that it would make sense for them to be able to do it. But those scenes are obviously very tension-filled, very pivotal, because it's a lot at risk, and I like the way they were written. As for the writing style, I loved the writing. I think it was really appropriate for the age that it was trying to be. It felt YA, and it felt the right type of YA, that it wasn't too young, wasn't too old, and the characters sounded like they would be if they were 15 years old, which again, really appreciate that. As for the plot, the one major plot hole that I had at the formation of this book, which was just how much Joan knew when she had her first time jump experience, because there were sections of this book that made it sound like she'd never known anything about this until she had her time jump, and all of a sudden she was thrust into this world completely lost. But then there were other sections of the book that made it sound like she'd known for about 2 years beforehand. And I know it feels really inconsequential, but for me, for the formation of the character, I needed to kind of have that information down pat in order to really understand just how out of the loop she was in this world. But other than that, it was a fast-moving plot with lots of little challenges and moments to keep the tension up. As for intrigue, my intrigue definitely waned when I was reading this, but I think that was more to do with the fact that I just wasn't keen on reading this week because it was so hectic with work, and I found a new TV show that I really enjoyed. And then mixed with, I guess, the combination of the fact that this book wasn't a like all-out 5-star read for me, so it didn't really have me wanting to come back in the same way that a 5-star would have, but I still don't like discredit this book at all for like lack of intrigue. As for logic, I think given the age of the characters, they acted really logically, especially because there was sort of this new take on the YA dead or neglectful family trope that I think is really overused, but let's park that for another day. There was a sort of new take on this in that there really wasn't any adult supervision available to these kids, so the way that they acted as a result of that I think was really logical, and I appreciated that. Plus it felt young and it felt logical in the way that the characters were acting authentically to their age. As for enjoyment, I really enjoyed this book, had a lot of fun. There was that major plot hole that really sort of made me struggle through some of the moments, but other than that, I enjoyed the read. So that is the end of week 1. I know I was going to talk through the next stage of the quest path for the alchemy side quest that G over at Book Roast has added into Magical Readathon, but I think I'll just save that for next week. So you guys are gonna have to join in next week to sort of discuss what path I'm gonna go down, because I know that this time is the first time where you kind of can pick different options that then lead you to like a whole other thing. So I'll save that for next week. But quickly before I go, as for Magical Readathon, this got me my book with a wolf on the cover, which was my shapeshifting course, because I'm calling that a wolf. I'm claiming that as a wolf. But as for Realmathon, the number of points that I got for this one, it gets 10 points for being a hybrid genre, which is fantasy romance. It gets 10 points for being a genre of my realm, because it's got the romance very heavily in it. And then it gets 10 points for being between 201 and 400 pages. It's 356. Other than that, we get 6 points for source of light on the cover, because there's just stars all over the cover, and I call those a source of light. We get 5 points for a new to me author. I've never read from Vanessa Lam before. We get 4 points for mental health rep. There is a massive massacre at the beginning of this book, and the rest of the book is the characters dealing with the sort of PTSD from that, so definitely mental health rep. Gets 3 points for underrated book, because I haven't heard anybody talk about this since all those initial unboxing Illumicrate videos. I haven't heard this mentioned since, so I'm gonna call it underrated. And then it gets 3 points for being a YA or middle grade. That's only a monster. That's the end of this first week of Magical Readathon and Realmathon. I hope you're all having an amazing beginning to the month of April, and if you're joining these readathons, I hope you are smashing out your course load and getting tons and tons of points for your team in Realmathon, especially if you're on Team Cyrus, which is obviously the realm that's gonna win. Let me know in the comments down below what you've read this first week in April. I'd love to know. Or just let me know what you're reading at the moment, loving it, hating it, all that kind of thing. Come and chat to me in the comments down below. I love talking to you guys, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It's a super easy way to help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!